When I looked up the lectionary reading for today, I once again thought that I should check the lectionary before I agree to do the reflection. What can I possibly say about this prayer so familiar to all of us? The third prayer I learned as a child, after "Now I lay me down to sleep" and Hail Mary. The latter, which resulted in my praying for us Cinders until I was about 8, the downside of rote learning for pre-literate children. Baffled and befuddled, as my mother would say, I did some research. I'm going to share briefly with some of the more thought-provoking ideas which I found, and end with one of my favorite statements about prayer from the poet-priest George Herbert. First, I had never thought of the address to God, Father, as a departure from common Jewish practice. I do know that Jews think the name of God is too holy either to say or to write, but I do not think of the word Father as being particularly intimate. Perhaps had I been born in 1850, I would have addressed my father as Father, but I'm quite sure I never did so while I was alive. What I learned is that the Aramaic word for father, which Luke translates to the Greek, is actually closer to daddy than to father. It calls us into a closer and more intimate relationship with God. Also, as often as I have said this prayer at home and at church, I have never really thought of it as a communal petition. The pronouns are we and us rather than I and me. One scholar suggests that we should actually call this the disciples' prayer rather than the Lord's Prayer, because we asked for us and not for me. It should have occurred to me. We say this prayer as a community every time we celebrate the Eucharist, but I had never focused on its corporate quality. Jesus is teaching it to his disciples, and they, the group which will become the early church, are given this prayer. It is the church, as well as the individuals in it, that is responsible for seeing that God's name is hallowed in this world by making the actions of the church and the individuals in it reflect God's will for the world. The other really important idea for me in this translation is the use of for or because in the context of forgiveness. Our sins against God are forgiven because we forgive those who have wronged us. We make a petition, but it's paired with a promise. These ideas have given me something to think about for a while. Now I would like to share with you my favorite poem about prayer. George Herbert was a 17th century Anglican priest in a rural parish. He might have eclipsed, both in preaching and in poetry, his contemporary John Donne, but he died of tuberculosis at the age of 40. Like Donne, he was a metaphysical poet. He loved metaphors. This poem is a series of metaphors which describe what prayer meant to George Herbert. Prayer. Prayer, the church's banquet, angels' age, God's breath in man returning to his birth, the soul in paraphrase, heart in pilgrimage, the Christian plummet sounding heaven and earth, engine against the Almighty, sinner's tower, reversed thunder, Christ's side-piercing spear, the 6 days' world transposing in an hour, a kind of tune which all things hear and fear, softness and peace and joy and love and bliss, exalted manna, gladness of the best, heaven in ordinary, man well dressed, the Milky Way, the bird of paradise, church bells beyond the stars heard, the soul's blood, the land of spices, something understood.